Hi and welcome to this YouTube video. In this video, I'm going to explain what two-dimensional arrays are or 2D arrays are in C. So let's just picture a table or a grid or a matrix, right? That is essentially what a 2D array is. It's like having rows and columns that organize data neatly. So we have rows and we have columns in a matrix. Now, in order to model this kind of structure, we need 2D arrays. Now, previously in this course, we talked about one-dimensional arrays, which is like, for example, this. We have an array of integer values, which is called num, and it can store 10 items. Now, what if we wanted to create like almost like a matrix type of representation, where we could not only store um, specific, where we could not only store like one-dimensional items, like just a list of numbers. What if we wanted to store also a list of arrays in a matrix manner? Now, that is what 2D arrays are, and it's just a way of like modeling a matrix in your code in C. So in order to do just that, we are going to need to create two square brackets. Now, this first square bracket is going to represent the rows, the number of rows that this two-dimensional array can have. That is this first row, this second row, and this third row. And then the second square bracket right here is going to represent the number of columns that this array can have. So the way you can think about it, the first square bracket is going to represent the number of items that can be stored in this array. Now, the second square bracket is going to represent the number of items that can be stored in elements of the original array. That is, the first one stores the number of elements as a whole that can be stored in the array, and this is 1, 2, 3. Then the second square bracket represents the number of items that can be stored in each element in that array. So let's model this example right here. So we see that we have 3 rows and 3 columns. So that is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say 3 there, and we're going to say 3 here. Now, what we now need to do is that we need to equate this to our curly brackets. Now, I want you to think of, let me just indent this in a way that will make it look proper. Now, I want you to think of it as a matrix right here. So what we are now simply going to do is that we are going to create another curly bracket inside this matrix. I'm going to come here and create another curly bracket. So the first item is 1, 2, 3. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3. Then the second one is 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to say 4, 5, 6. And then the last one is 7, 8, 9. So let me just push this in here. So right now, it's almost like we have modeled this specific two-dimensional array inside our code, inside C programming. Now, before, in order to access a specific item inside a one-dimensional array, all we had to do was use the specific index that we needed. But in order to access like a specific item inside a 2D array, you need two indexes. You need the index of the first item to get the row, whatever row it is in. Then you need the index of the second square brackets to get what column it is. So for example, if we wanted to print out 1 right here, we would need to access whatever row and whatever column it is at. So if I wanted to print it out, I would say printf, and I'll say %d, and then what I need to do is I need to print out 1, and then we know that this 1 is at index 0 of the first item and index 0 of the second square bracket. I mean, because indexing starts from 0, it means that the first column, sorry, it means that the first row in this matrix is this first row. So we're going to grab this first row, and we now need to also grab the column. Since the second square bracket represents the columns of the matrix, we're going to grab index 0 of the column. So it means that we are going to be able to grab this 1 right here. In order to grab it, we're going to say nums 0, and 0. So using this, we should be able to print out 1 in the terminal. So I'm just going to come right here and run this code. Now, once I run it, it should print 1 for us in the terminal. So I'm just going to run that again. Okay, I hadn't saved the file. Let me save it and run it. So once I run it, you will notice that it prints 1 out in the terminal. So let's say, for example, I wanted to print 2. It means that we are still printing from row 0 because it's we're using the indexing. We're printing from row 0 and we want to print the second column. Since we're using indexing, we're going to leave this as 0 and then we're going to set this to 1 because we're trying to print from row 0 index 1. So if I clear the terminal right now and I run this, it's going to print 2 for us in the terminal. Let's say I wanted to print 9, for example. We know that 9 is in the 3rd row, but using indexing is going to be 2 because this is 0, 1, 2. So we're going to say 2, and then we want to print 9 also. Because 9 is in the last column, it means that we're going to also say 2 because this is 0, 1, 2. Now, once I save that and I run this in the terminal, it's supposed to print 9 out, which we can see here in the terminal. So that is how we can model two-dimensional arrays. Now, you could have as many elements as you want in an array. You could have like 10 rows and 10 columns, and you could populate the arrays with whatever data you want. It is up to you. Now, there's also something else that I would like to explain to you. How to print out the elements inside a 2D array using a for loop. Now, in order to do this, we are going to require 2 for loops. Now, the first for loop is going to loop through all the rows, and the second for loop is going to loop through the columns in each row. So I'm going to show you how it works. So first, I'm going to write the for loop. Now, we need to take note that we have 3 rows. I'm going to say for int I equals to 0. I'm initializing I right there. For int I is equals to 0. Now I'm going to say, well, I is less than 3. And I'm going to say I plus plus. Now I am going to explain what this means. So what we're saying is that for I is equals to 0, so we're going to start at index 0. Then we want to say while I is less than 3, it means that we're going to loop from 0, 1, and 2, so that we can grab the 0, 1, and 2 indexes. So while we're going to say for int I is equals to 0, I less than 3, I plus plus. So for each iteration, it's going to increment the value of I. Then we need to write a second for loop inside this first for loop, which is going to loop through the columns in each row. So when we run this first for loop the first time, it's going to grab this first row because I is starting from 0. So we're going to say for int I is equals to 0. Then what we now want to do is write a for loop that is going to loop through this entire array, which is at the 0th row. So I'm going to write the for loop and say for int j is equals to 0 also. And I'm going to say j less than 3, then j plus plus. So what does this mean? We're trying to say that, okay, loop through the first item, loop through all the rows. After looping through all the rows, we now want to loop through the column in each row using j. So what I'm now going to simply say is I'm going to say printf, and in here I'm going to say %d, print, %d, then I'll put a comma and say nums of I and j. So I'm going to explain what this is, but let me just put a \n right here. So right now, we're going to loop through all the rows. Then for each row that we loop through, we're going to loop through all the columns in that row. So let's say, for example, we run the program. It's first going to start from index 0. Then it's going to come to this first for loop. Then it's going to loop through all the items. Because we're saying from in j equals 0, then while j is less than 2, it's going to loop from 0, 1, 2, and then it's going to print out the value of I, value of it's going to print out the value of whatever index it is using the row index and the column index. So let me run this and let's run this and see what we get. So you notice that it prints from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So what we're successfully able to do is that we were successfully able to create a two-dimensional array that has 3 rows and 3 columns, just like we have in this picture, almost like a matrix. And then what we're now able to do is we were able to print out all the items inside this array using 2 for loops. The first for loop goes through each row, and then for each row the second for loop goes through each column and prints out all the items in the column. Now after it has finished printing out all the items in the column, it now goes back to this loop, and then this loop increments itself and moves to the next row, and that is how all the items get printed out in the terminal. So that is just like the very basic explanation of how two-dimensional arrays work in the C programming language. So if you have any question, don't hesitate to ask me in the comment section and I will get back to you.